Week 2, Lesson 9, Early Detective Comics. Major Malcolm Wheeler-Nicholson was born in 1890 and died in 1965. In 1922, Major Wheeler-Nicholson started writing short stories for pulp papers. In 1925, in New York, he created Vheeler-Nicholson Incorporated to syndicate his work. Among the work published was a daily comic strip of Treasure Island, based off the story from Robert Louis Stevenson. Famous Funnies was released in 1933, which reprinted popular comic strips. Seeing the success of this, Malcolm Wheeler-Nicholson founded National Allied Publications in 1934. The problem was, when he went to buy the distribution rights, it turned out all the rival companies bought up all the popular comic strips. This led Nicholson to create original comic strips to put in comic book issue format. On February 1935, New Fun number 1 became the first comic to contain completely original artwork, and not just newspaper reprints. New Fun number 1 was also the first comic book to carry advertising. New Fun was a mild success, so Nicholson followed up by creating another series, New Comics, which quickly turned into New Adventure Comics, and finally settled on the name Adventure Comics. The problem was that he had to get newspapers to sell these comics, and most newsstands didn't want to carry comics with original characters, because no one had heard of them, so they were not a sure thing. Wheeler-Nicholson had a financial crisis, and he was only able to publish one more title before he left the comic book industry. Detective Comics number 1 arrived on stands 3 months later than originally intended. Remember, this was all happening during the Great Depression, so return on investment wasn't good enough to justify Nicholson doing this himself. Soon, he got into debt with his publisher and distributor, Harry Donenfeld. In order to continue publishing, Harry Donenfeld and his accountant, Jack S. Leibowitz, made a deal to own the comics with Nicholson and created a business known as Detective Comics Incorporated. In 1938, Donenfeld sent Nicholson and his wife on a cruise to come up with new ideas. When they came back home, the lock on his office door was changed. Donenfeld then took Detective Comics to bankruptcy court, where the judge, Abe Menon, who was a friend of Donenfeld's, ordered Detective Comics assets sold off. The company was then bought up by Independent News. Wheeler-Nicholson went on to write war stories and critiques of the American military, but his time in comics had finished. So, what about Detective Comics itself? Well, the comic was an anthology of hard-boiled detectives as it told their individual stories. Using a variety of different styles and tones, the book only had its theme of Dick Tracy-like detectives holding the comic together. Characters like Speed Saunders and his River Patrol would go up against villains like Captain Scum. The book also had characters with names like Bart Regan, Spy, Eagle-Eyed Jake, and Gumshoe Gus. Just by hearing these names, you can tell that they were aiming for a younger audience. But, despite the silly names and simplistic premise of some of the titles, these comic books took notes from Dick Tracy and weren't afraid to get dark, punishing the hero, and have a charismatic villain or ongoing stories. Detective Comics would also have a writer pair who we'll talk about more next week. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were working on Bart Regan's Spy, as well as another character, Slam Bradley. Slam Bradley is one of the examples of everything that was wrong with comics at the time. He was a freelance sleuth, a fighter, an adventurer, and I'm pretty sure we can add overachiever. He easily solves any problems he comes across with little to no effort. He has a short, cartoonish-looking sidekick named Shorty, who is absolutely useless in most situations, and is only in the comic to make Bradley look better and to give exposition to. On top of all that, the comic is more than a little racist by today's standards. In Detective Comics number 1, there is not a single Asian shown in a good light. In Detective Comics number 2, they try and fix this by adding Detective Chang to the roster. However, he seems insultingly stereotypical by today's standards. Detective Comics would go on to be the longest published title of the 20th century, finally coming to an end in 2011 with over 883 issues. Detective Comics Inc. would shorten its title to DC Comics, and the publisher would become one of the two largest comic book publishers of the 20th century. Questions to contemplate. Do outdated stereotypes hurt the quality of a story, even if that story has a positive message? What are the potential problems with trying to sell a product with only original and not established characters?